I want to say I don't speak on behalf of any political party. I have no land investments in Fremantle or Kwinana. I respect the work that has been done over many decades by the Department of Transport and the Fremantle Port Authority, and that's why this makes, I suppose, the Fremantle divestment, or the sale, if you will, so strange to me. For a long time I haven't been able to publicly speak about the Fremantle divestment, but current circumstances and the importance of this issue, I think it forces me to talk about it as frankly as I can, because it's a very important moment in WA's economic history. There is so much noise about the Perth freightless link that my aim today is to look at the commercials of the project, and you can make up your mind which is the best option for WA. So to start with, let's look at, there's many things which we could talk about, but after spending a lot of time in the last couple of weeks thinking about it, there's really only 5 areas I'd like to focus on today. Is there excess capacity in the inner harbour? What are we trying to achieve, and how is planning and financing fitting into this? Where is the real value for Fremantle Port? The economic benefits of developing the Outer Harbour, and the proposed solution and deal. So this shows you the development of the growth of ships in the last 50 years, and as you can see, Fremantle has really fallen behind in the last 20 years. A message constantly hammered home is that we have excess capacity in the inner harbour. And theoretically, that may be true. As we, and I mean everybody in this room, is probably open-minded and willing to give the government the benefit of the doubt, if we do have excess capacity in the harbour, in the inner harbour, and it is effective and operating to its maximum ability, then why do we need to spend $1.9 billion on the Perth freightless link? And that's not all the cost. There's another $1.3 billion to go in under the Swan River and the logistics connection on Rouse Head as well. We have a single grade, country grade rail line going into Fremantle that's not double stacked, that doesn't have any passing loops, doesn't have marshalling yards, doesn't allow more capacity because it conflicts with the passenger lines, and more importantly, it can't be upgraded at the current stage. So it's also, the inner harbour is nowhere near economic hubs or the economic zones. We can't accept the latest, let alone the future ships, because of depth and length restrictions. There is additional demand in Kwinana, as I'm sure you know, that has been blocked for many years. Fremantle requires major logistic and automation upgrades. There's no land to expand, and it doesn't even operate 24 hours a day. So we're selling this port at $2 billion, which quite frankly is a knockdown price, and it barely pays the state debt's interest for 1 year. So it's a great deal for quick cash, if that's what you're after. But this has long-term consequences. This is not a property or a company, and this is a very important point. Infrastructure assets, you live with the consequences of those decisions for decades. So let's sort of stand back and think about why we're actually doing this. How does this all fit in? Who really benefits from this? And I'd say one of the main beneficiaries are the Rouse Head logistic companies. This is a great deal for them. It's a get-out-of-jail card. Particularly one company, which is a major leaseholder, really dominates the industry and is vertically integrated, is based in the east and has very strong federal government connections, would see this as a wonderful deal. The divestment in Fremantle Port would in one swoop eliminate any real competition for decades and would focus on road freight. The rail would be stunted, and the development of the Outer Harbour would be controlled by the logistics companies and their network of investors because of their market dominance and the lack of regulation. So I think that the Nationals were quite right to take this stand last year. It is also a sublime deal for the Port of Melbourne. As you can see, half of all, these are the main sea routes in Australia, and these just show the volume that's coming into WA. One of the things which we've been looking at recently is the rail imports. This is the imports of the ratio of imports to exports from WA, and it's very hard. It's not. You could argue that it's not even recorded, and you can ask why that is. You could say it's 3 to 1. I've heard this morning it's actually closer to 100%. Basically imports, and we don't really export anything to the eastern states. What this is really saying is that with Melbourne in particular, they can lock in long-term import costs, and Perth will continue to be a third or fourth rate feeder port for Melbourne. It's really asset stripping on a massive scale, and that's why I'd argue that our costs are so high. It's also great for the investors who already have existing relationships with the logistics companies. As investors in the future building the Outer Harbour, they'll be able to lock in 20 to 25% returns, because you'll be able to force the government, in practical terms is what would happen, be able to force the government into these nice returns, because they won't have a choice. If the government wants this, then you're going to have to cough up. The government really misunderstands and underestimates the grey elements in these types of contracts. And all of this is really hardly surprising, considering the 2010 Fremantle dredging program would have come with certain commitments to justify not only the investment in the dredging, but also the building out of Rouse Head. And it's not that the authorities were wrong on this, but they were forced down that track because the Outer Harbour wasn't built earlier this century. So we're really compounding previous problems, and you could say that where we are today is just a follow-on from that. It's also excellent for politically connected residential property developers in the Kwinana area, as they have an added incentive to push for reducing the buffers. Others suggest it is the federal government punishing us for daring to question the biased, prejudiced and inequitable GST distributions. And one final beneficiary from this are the advisors, who can push this deal through as quickly as they can, grab their performance bonuses and head back to Sydney. So it really benefits a lot of other parties, and I don't really see where the real benefits for WA are. So let's sort of stand back a little bit further and think about what we're trying to achieve. So we could whiteboard this out, but let's cut to the chase. The main areas you'd want to focus on, I'd argue, are jobs, industrial development, logistics, tourism and land development. To achieve these goals, what we want is a modern, high-throughput port with lots of land around it and a deep water access, and that's in Kwinana. We'd also, secondly, want an integrated intermodal hub next to the port. Again, that's Kwinana. We'd love a large-scale, international quality industrial park integrated with the intermodal hub and the port, which allows new industries to develop, fertilised by the facilities already operating. And that's all up and down this coast. This is this area. It's perfect for it. And then finally, we want to maximise tourism in WA. And that is Fremantle, with the development of all of Victoria Quay into an international grade waterfront development. And here are some photos of what a world-class industrial park would look like. So I just want to point this one out because this is very personal for me. That building there I built a few years ago, ran it for a couple of years and sold it on. So, you know, I've got a bit of a feeling for industrial parks and the goodness and the development opportunities that they present. Normally, states and countries want to stimulate rather than stunt business activity around ports because they generate such high economic impacts to the region. Nowadays, ports have to be more than mere links between logistics networks. They also need to play a more important role in developing of new industries, in job creation and contributions to the community. That is why countries build major industrial parks around ports. We can only do this in Kwinana. Fremantle also deserves a world-class cruise terminal, also for tourism. Particularly in Vancouver and Singapore, these create a massive amount of jobs and economic activity, and that's what Fremantle's suited for. I even saw the Queen Mary 2 the other day. It's pretty pathetic what sort of infrastructure we have there at the moment for these big ships coming in. You know, we're giving away money. Fremantle should be a tourist destination. It should not be a logistics island surrounded by suburbia. The current urban rehabilitation and transformation projects championed by the City of Fremantle need to continue to enrich the riverfront and the city. Fremantle also deserves an apart from the international cruise ship terminal, world-class theatre facilities. Can't do that here, that suits Fremantle. These are from other old port cities that have been rejuvenated in recent years. These developments maximise the economic, social and cultural benefits while subsidising the development of new port facilities. Current planning, and this is we're moving into the next stage, current planning is really, we have this pot of money and we try and spend it the best we can. And that's pre-Keynesian 1930s. It means reduced investment, and that's why we're all having to suffer until we earn more money, which is what's happening now. This is why people say we can't afford the Outer Harbour. And I say the approach is around the wrong way. We must say we cannot afford not to build the Outer Harbour. And the real reason is, it's how you value the economic and social benefits of a project. And then you figure out how you're going to pay for it. It might be external money, might be government, but you're looking at the bigger picture and how you maximise your economic and social benefits, which is a very different way of looking at planning. And that's what happens in many parts of the world, and that's being forced on us here when we're lacking money. But this is just a normal approach everywhere else that we need to bring here. And it's for the benefit of everybody. The private sector, and I've spoken to investors, would love to invest in the Outer Harbour now if they're allowed to, and the asset package made sense. Currently, the package is for a speedy fire sale that unfortunately reduces returns for all of us and transfers the upside to the private sector. So let's look at logistics planning. Moving on, around here. This is to emphasise the importance of Kwinana, because it shows the movements of containers in this area. So 65% is on that main arterial rail line, and it's all about rail. You understand that, you know, it's road, which is really expensive and polluting, and you want to get the lowest possible price. Sea freight's great, but it takes a long time. Rail's the one to beat, but you need a bit more time, logistics and planning to do that properly. So that main arterial rail line, as you know, goes out to Kewdale, which is our main intermodal hub at the moment. Fremantle, as you can see, is a bit of a detour. And it's another 12 kilometres of the country grade line just to get in and out of there. So it's actually more expensive than what we could be doing. Also, as we know, in Kwinana, this is our main bulk and liquids areas. So we have a lot of the facilities here. We just need to build on them. We need a modern port in Perth, as the imports and exports are heavily skewed towards the northwest. It's in reality that the eastern states are remote, and that we should maximise our strategic advantage, potentially even rail freighting goods east. And you may remember I was saying earlier that the ratio is very skewed towards imports coming into WA. Well, potentially you could flick it around the other way, and I could go into the details. There's a really nice arbitrage opportunity on this, and if you've studied it and you played around in logistics between freight and rail, you know, there's a great opportunity there that I'm pretty sure that the guys in the east can see it, and we're just not making the most of it. So let's move on. Where is the real value in Fremantle Port? And it's not about the capacity. I've been saying this for years, and now I'm going to show you. You're the only people who've seen this in WA, apart from a very quick practice session last week. So now we're starting to move into some detail. I was talking to Jonathan Smith about this from AMC. I've got a lot of time for AMC and the amazing work he has done there, and it's going to get better very soon with the defence contracts. Now what we've done here is we've looked at all the sales in the last 3 years in the industrial areas in Fremantle and around. This is Fremantle Port, the estimated sales value. So that's not a real number. That's just based upon the current valuation that the government's going to sell it for. These are real numbers. That's Kwinana. All of these have been checked by real estate companies who work in this area. This is the Australian Marine Complex pricing, recent prices, and this is outside Fremantle Port. And so what this does is you take the value, the difference value, and you times it by the number of hectares which are available down here, and you start getting some pretty strange numbers. And I have to say, I've tried to simplify this to try and paint a picture. You know, you can say there's different sizes of land, and there's some with buildings on, some vacant, and better location, all that sort of stuff. But the point is, you get the direction. The direction is pretty up. There's a lot of profit in here. And the reason is, and I suppose also, this is the cost of the Outer Harbour Stage 1. So basically anything you do, you can cover the cost of the Outer Harbour Stage 1. This is also basically the cost of selling Fremantle Port. So there's something, we're missing something here. It doesn't sort of make sense again. That we're giving all this value, and who's going to capture it? Do you think the government's set up to capture it? Not at the moment. So let's look at the economic benefits of the Indian Ocean Gateway initially. Now this is talking about stage 1 and how many hectares we've got to play with, and this is very, it's open to interpretation how much land you have and what you do with it. But clearly you can see that there's a lot of value, there's a lot of jobs created, and there's a lot of external investment that wants to come into this area. You have to remember, it's one of the best areas, and I've studied this and written reports on it for government. You know, you have to remember, perhaps you don't know, but Kwinana is really, really blessed. It's got everything you want. It's got land, it's got infrastructure, it's got raw materials, it's got gas, it's got water, it's got a deep water port, it's got everything. Nowhere else in Australia has this. Not even Sydney or Melbourne. They used to have industrial parks, but they sold them off for residential years ago. So you can't do them again. Once this land, these critical areas go, you can't get them back. You can never get back the areas in Melbourne or Sydney. The only other comparison we have is Eagle Farm in Brisbane, and they have decided to do 24-hour logistics, which is fine because they don't have the resource. We have everything here. We have everything you need. And even new companies coming on like lithium refining and so forth only adds to this wonderful mix we have in this location. We've got to make the most of it. So this is also looking at the Fremantle waterfront development, and as you can see, there's a serious amounts of money just sitting there. And if last time you've probably been to Victoria Quay and you've driven over the bridge and you look down and you see that wonderful car park, I say that's the most expensive car park in the world because that land is worth so much, and we're putting cars on it. I just flabbergasted by that decision. This is, I love this photo, I took this a couple of weeks ago. This is our main country line. This is the main rail line going into Fremantle. I think we can do a little bit better than that. So let's have a look at the types of jobs. So, you know, we're all talking about, oh, jobs, but there's different types of jobs. There's construction jobs, which are effectively like sugar. You get a good sugar rush, but they're not around in a couple of years. The ones you really want are the long-term jobs, and these pay a lot more. So row 8, 500. Now these numbers, they're pretty loopy. They change every couple of months. These are the latest numbers I've got from the Minister that they've publicly said. But, you know, I've heard all sorts of things. So I've just picked a reference point based upon the latest information. But, you know, next week it could be something else. But the point is, there's only about 3,300, 3,400 jobs. There's so much more in Fremantle and Outer Harbour, and the long-term jobs are here. These are the ones you want your kids to grow up and move into. These are your high-tech areas, which are focusing on, defence and biotechnologies, industrial ceramics and so forth. Because in a couple of years, your construction jobs go, and they're the only permanent jobs you can get are tied to the Outer Harbour, both in Fremantle and here. And there's different types of jobs, as we talked about. These are the ones which are the traditional ones in Fremantle and Kewdale, which earn okay, but these are the high risk of automation. These are the ones you want to move towards in Kwinana. These are your design engineering, your high paid jobs in the future. And they can only happen here. They can't happen really anywhere else in WA. Not all jobs are the same. Net present values. Okay, net present values, cost and benefits. So what we're trying to show here is this is the cost of the Perth Freightless Link at the moment. And then this is the cost with the Swan River crossing. And this is what they say the benefits are at the moment. Now, I'm a little bit old-fashioned. I like cash, right? Cash coming in, export cash coming in. We need cash in WA. It has to come in, right? I don't really count benefits of increased traffic time, less traffic time as a real benefit. It has to be cash. So I've discounted these. So that's what this blue one's about, right? If you take out the non-cash contribution, the only reason that's in there is really the heavy vehicle charge, which is sort of we're paying ourselves, which really I don't think there's a real benefit. It's more, how do we bring money in and how do we generate tourist dollars? How do we get exports? That is a Fremantle waterfront. That's tourism. And that's just what we can see at the moment. If you build something decent like theatres and so forth, that number is a lot higher. But it starts getting a bit strange, and we'll just keep it simple. The Outer Harbour, this is not an overnight exercise. This is based on 25 years of studies. So the generation that the Outer Harbour can do for economic stimulus is massive. So we're getting to the end. What's the solution? Why are we here? What's the deal? What deal can we put on the table? Well, let's go beyond what Fremantle Port Authority and the City of Fremantle have proposed. Let's look at an international scale waterfront development across all of Victoria Quay. And at Kwinana, an international industrial park fully integrated with an intermodal hub and the port. You've seen the photos, and that's exactly what it's supposed to look like. And you go and have a look at, Venice or Barcelona or Lisbon or Copenhagen or whatever. They're basically the same sort of design because it works and you make lots of money from it. It's great for the whole region. So we want to move all the agribusiness and livestock vehicles, that's a road, get rid of that car park because it's really valuable land. All dangerous goods, because there's a blast zone around Fremantle, and that blast zone is wasting a lot of space. I'm quite frankly, why do we even have dangerous goods going through Fremantle, which is in the middle of suburbia? And cap and transition. You need to have a volume of containers. Containers is not the whole thing, but it's very important because it's stable and you can grow. And you can also afford to build out KBT or Kwinana Bulk Terminal a bit better, and you can get more volumes through there, not just for mineral resources, iron ore, but you can do a lot more. And the beauty of this, at the end of the lease period, it all comes back to the state anyway. So at the end of the day, we win. So I'd like to say that the new industries you can create in this industrial park are like defence and marine, advanced materials and industrial ceramics, chemical engineering, petrochemicals, biotechnology, automated vehicles and drones. So after all you've seen, think about, we're valuing Fremantle divestment at $2 billion. So pick a number. Pick a number what you think based upon what I've talked about. What if we did this, what would you pay for the Outer Harbour and the Fremantle tourism focus? So pick a number, it's in the billions. So I think a fair price is $4 billion. And as I say, I think it's a fair price. Remember, you still have to develop this out. You still have to have a lot of development capital. But what you're really focusing on is where the real value is. And it's not the port. I couldn't care. The capacity is not the key issue. The key issue is what you do around the port and the value of that land. And that land is only in Kwinana. And that's why that is there. So you're paying more to do it properly because you have to integrate this all. You have to do the port, you have to do the intermodal and the industrial park all together. And you need one party to pay for it and do it all properly. And that can't be the government because they don't have the money. And the questionable whether they could do this. But there are countries that specialise in this area. And the Japanese are really good at this area. Germans, Americans. So there's companies that specialise in this area, and running industrial parks is not an easy job. You have to have a good knowledge of all these areas to develop it. And also, let's be a little bit more controversial. Now, we could sell these assets to. There's only a couple of super funds and infrastructure investors at the end of the day. You have to remember Fremantle and Kwinana are really highly strategic from a security point of view. So you're not going to get some big countries with big money coming in. It's just not going to happen. So there's really only a very small pool of investors who can pick this up. And they're all based over east. Another way might be an initial public offering, open to all parties and especially Western Australian citizens. And the historical precedents include London Underground or the Suez Canal or the Corinth Canal. There's lots of examples of this which happened in the past, which we haven't used that model for a while, but it's very suitable here. And more importantly, the benefits stay in WA. And the reason I put this in, I didn't really need to, but the point is, I'm trying to move to transparency, trying to be open and transparent, because that's what I think we need to do as a society and also from the government. Actually talk about these things, and I'm quite happy, in anything in my presentation or whatever today, I'm quite happy to argue any point. And if you've got a better idea on how it can improve, well, let's do it. This is not about my opinion and there's no choice. This is what I can see. If you can see something better, let's move to that better model. We're coming to the end. So you may not agree with President Trump, but he has reminded us that defence of our society cannot be outsourced, and we must take responsibility for our own security. We can just not ignore the lack of defence WA has. A strong WA is a border for the western half of Australia, and it is clear we need to forge our own path back to prosperity. A strong, diversified economy is an essential foundation for our security. The current state budget is like roulette, waiting for the resource markets to change our way. An over-reliance on resources and hydrocarbons has exposed just how concentrated our economy is. Our economy isn't even sustainable, and it's not just because of the debt, it's because 15% of our revenues come from finite resource royalties. We need a more diversified economy, one in which creates an environment that anyone can prosper, not just those suitably connected or big international companies. We need to create our own opportunities. The Outer Harbour and the waterfront developments are projects for an open-minded, progressive and positive aspirational society. We have the opportunity to build the most modern port in the world with advanced logistics and revolutionary interfaces. Create jobs that haven't even been thought of, and develop industries that haven't even been invented yet, and produce products and services that people want. You should support the Outer Harbour as it is a better deal for the state, but more importantly, it would stimulate massive economic benefits in this region, developing new industries which flow on to the surrounding areas. And in conclusion, history favours the bold, the audacious and the daring. We here think not of ourselves and the current deficits, the gutted industrial landscape. We must think of future generations, the quality of our stewardship and the legacy that we leave behind. This state was not built by those who sold our assets at knockdown prices. It was built by those who who maximise the value of our products from the land and the sea. The Outer Harbour and the waterfront developments are our opportunities to be bold, audacious and daring. Let's not shrink and accept second best. It's about doing things right the first time and having the guts to admit that when we make a mistake and then fixing it up. Many people in our society are holding us back through a fear of change. But let us not fear to change for the benefit of our society. Let's challenge the average status quo and past precedent and open-minded to alternatives. We owe this to future generations. And I'd also like to thank and finally Joanne and Carol for the wonderful leadership that they've given to the development of the Indian Ocean Gateway and the Outer Harbour in the last 2 years. They have really led from the front, and I've been very fortunate to have met them in my life. Thank you very much.